It is May 6 of 2014, and we're going to take a look at Kazimir Twardowski and his Phenomenology, which is nested between Brentano and Husserl. He was part of the Brentano school, but he emerged out of the Brentano school and wrote a logic of phenomenology, and that logic of phenomenology eventually led to Edmund Husserl and his phenomenology proper. So Twardowski played an important role, but he doesn't seem to get much press, and he doesn't get spoken of on a very regular basis. So he's been kind of an obscure figure, but he is an important figure. He played an important role for Scheler and for Husserl both, and of course he was part of the Brentano school, so he is a fundamental substrate as far as the emergence of phenomenology and postmodern thought. So he plays a very important role in Polish philosophy and for overall phenomenology in general. And we want to take a look at his offering in a collected series of writings that were edited by Bradlin and Walensky. It was published by Rodalpi Press in 1999. It was titled Action, Products, and Topics of Philosophy. And Twardowski is about actions and products. That's his phenomenology. It's based on thinking as an action, and then a thought is a product, or drawing is an action and an image is a product. So he likes that dichotomy, that duality of an action and the resultant product, and he frames his phenomenology within that kind of structuring. And he makes that kind of a model the pivot point of his axis threshold. So really, when we get to the axis threshold, he's going to reiterate this idea of action and product. Physical actions, physical products, mental actions, mental products, and what he calls psychophysical actions and psychophysical products, which are the element that he keys in on. The psychophysical action and product. So we'll take a look at his entire system, and he writes a logic, but we're going to take his logic and we're going to stack it on top of our grid for the structure of phenomenology. And it was presented in a way where it matches up, so we're going to look at it within each moment of the structured phenomenology that we have discussed in the past, but we're going to look at it within his logic. So it's going to be formally structured into subgroups, and then we'll follow the flow of his thought, and that will eventually lead to writing. His whole project leads to writing. He and Derrida are very much alike in this respect. The purpose of phenomenology is to reach the cognitive aspect and action of writing, and writing is what changes history. So it is a project of writing. The ultimate horizon is the written document, and how that written document contributes to a universality. Very much in tune with Derrida on that point, so we'll keep that in mind as we go, but he's kind of headed in that direction. So he'll work on the unconscious first, and in the logic of the unconscious. And after working through the logic of the unconscious, he'll transition through his axis point of that model of actions and products. And then he'll emerge out of that model of actions and products, and he'll develop a very specific process of writing the praxis document for changing history. So I'll pause here just a second, and then we'll take up his logic. To begin with, Twardowski says that the self is interrogated to form a theory of relation. We primarily are involved in articulating a theory of relation between the material world and the spiritual world, and we do this through the articulation of a series of concepts for the inner and outer experience. So our first goal is to reach this realm of conceptualization, and then when we create the series of concepts, we will construct a relational model. And he says that the model will address origin, and the model will address eschatological purpose. So it's very much a phenomenology of a praxis-oriented project that begins by acquiring the series of signs and then working those up into a model. Now, in the first subjectivity, he says that there are 4 considerations for the classifying of phenomena. And first of all, it's the stages. There are 4 specific stages for cognizing. There's sensation, perception, representation, and conceptualization. Sensation, perception, representation, and conceptualization. And he eventually wants to reach conceptualization, so obviously in the beginning we're going to be working through the intuitive sensations and perceptions. Now the second point, the second consideration is modalities. And he says there are 4 modalities of the formation of these initial images. And they are the number 1, the modality of forming images and concepts as sensations and ideas. And then 2, the modality of judgment, which is the realm of forming perceptions and inferences. And then the modality of feelings, and then the modality of volition and will. His third point is that we are to consider realms. There are 2 realms of the formation of his series of signs and its model. And that is, we begin in the intuitive realm of images, and we will end up in the non-intuitive realm of concepts. And then after realms, his fourth and final area of consideration is methodology. There is a process of assemblage for the substrate of each representation, and representations of judgments play a key role in forming non-intuitive concepts. So when we get to when we evolve out of the intuitive sensate formation of our very first substrate images for units of meaning, we're going to transition into conceptualization, but to get to conceptualization, we must pass through an area of representations of judgments, according to Twardowski. So there is going to be a realm of the representations of judgments, which will work on those substrate images that have been formed intuitively before we move into the non-intuitive work of forming the series of signs. So one thing that Twardowski does is he said there are, just as a kind of a preface before he gets up into his conceptual work, he says that there, see, I've got 5 points here. He makes 5 points concerning non-intuitive representation. It always combines the substrate intuitive representation plus a series of representations of judgments that are made. And those can include attaching of characteristics to the intuitive substrate, and it can include eliminating a characteristic or series of characteristics to the intuitive substrate. So it's pretty much, he doesn't say it, but he's kind of pointing to the Dokunta threshold is that realm where this representation of judgment is going to take place for refining the substrate intuitive images. Now, analytic concepts are going to be abstract characteristics or abstract relations, and they're acquired through subjective attention. And synthetic concepts will depict the relational characteristic hidden in the substrate unit of meaning itself. So there's always going to be an inherent type relational aspect to every concept we form. That's kind of a Wittgenstein idea that every network of lexical content always contains its own inherent syntax, its own relational syntax. And he says that we will engage in the methodology of symbolic thinking. When the verbal expression, the action, is unveiled, it elicits the substrate representation, or the product. And his whole philosophy is built on this idea of an action that yields a product. An action yields a product. Now, when he transitions into the area of the representations of judgments, he calls it, we would position this at the threshold of a cooperative dialogue, where the dialogue kind of refines the intuitive images. And he says that this area is an area of ideogenetic perspective. The substrate representations are a condition for conceptual judgment, and this is a mental phenomena, this mental judgment of the intuitive representations. And it will consider the actions, such as a physical action and physical products, mental actions and their mental products, or, as I said before, psychophysical actions and their psychophysical products. It will also consider alternate states. He says there is the mental state of accepting or rejecting an intuitive image as a concept, the psychophysical as a state of enunciation, where we actually enunciate the affirmation or the negation of the intuitive substrate. And then finally he says we will consider the alternate area of sense, because an intuitive image can have a logical sense, which means that our judgment will be the consequence of other judgments. It can have a psychological sense as a mental function, and most importantly, we're looking to refine these intuitive images to reach a dispositional sense of some kind of enduring inherent trait. We're looking for some kind of enduring essentiality to the intuitive image. So we actually want to try to find what he calls, we want to refine the image to the dispositional sense, of enduring trait. That's the goal of the Dakunta threshold of a communal dialogue. And it is the realm of the representations of judgments. Now from here, he wants to take us up to forming concepts, so we'll pause here just for a second. So moving up into the cognitive realm, where we're actually going to get involved in forming these conceptual models, he says that the characteristics of forming, we want to form an enduring psychophysical product model. He calls the sign model, and to keep it consistent with his project, he calls it a psychophysical product model of signs. He says the characteristics are, number one, it will be a posited model. Actions and products are enduring if they are applied to reality or posited to actuality. They will represent a configuration. The psychophysical product posits a new configuration of actuality. And it will represent the real. The product is beyond phenomenology now. We transition out of phenomenology and we exist. The posited model will be an existent real thing. So it's, as Hegel said, it becomes posited in the realm of the true. That's important here. We've got Twardowski making the exact same statement, that the posited sign model exists in the realm of the true. It's not a phenomenological model. Now, it does exist as an internal externality. That's the definition of positing, remember. It is a subjective act. It does rest at the very forefront of our mind as kind of a picture window filter through which we view external actuality, and it is our positive idea of the reality in actuality. It's our intentionality. So it's a psychophysical model, an external expression of an internal mental action. An external expression of an internal mental action. The subjective mental function is partial cause of the product model. And it takes the form of a series of signs of meaning. So now we've evolved away from that series of intuitive substrate images for each unit of meaning, and the substrate intuitive image has been refined through the work of communal dialogue and judgment, of considering all of the alternatives to sense and to states, mental states, and we refine those images to the point where they become more significant, and I give them a sign, a linguistic sign as a designation, and we end up forming a series of signs of meaning which are ready to be posited as an internal externality where the psychophysical and the mental coexist. And for Twardowski, that is his pivot point. And this is precisely like Hegel. There's a great deal like Hegel here, because Hegel put his logic at the axis threshold, and Twardowski puts his logic at the axis threshold, and he puts his sign model at the axis threshold. So basically, Twardowski says, every individual, you and me, all of us together, we always hold unconsciously, probably, more than consciously, but we always hold in memory, stored in our memory, a model of our convictions and beliefs. For example, for me, I hold in my subconscious a model of Jürgen Moltmann's theology. I have it as a map, as a synchronous firing chain of neurons stored in my memory, my long-term memory, as a semantic model. I have it stored. Well, Twardowski says that everyone does. Everyone has a stored logical model, and so his axis threshold isn't just logic per se. It is logic plus the fact that every individual holds a logical model in their long-term memory. So for him, we have the actual model here at the axis threshold, and it gives us the 6 steps for reaching the enduring sign model. And number 1 is the psychophysical action of the image that we discussed, and it involves the mental product of an idea for that image that we gain first, intuitively, and then the actual action of image drawing within the self. That's step 1, is the psychophysical action of forming an image. Now, step 2 is the psychophysical product of the image, which consists of, number 1, the drawn image, and then point 2, plus the coexisting idea within the image that we use to form it. So it becomes a coexisting image plus idea. Now, step 3 is the psychophysical action of viewing the image, which, if it was just within ourselves, it would be a recollection. But if it was an image or a diagram we produced and presented to an audience, then it would be the viewing of that image by others. And that results in 1, the extraction of the idea contained in the drawing, in the image. And 2, the mental product of the idea attains its own separate existence. And that leads to step 4, which is going to be the mental product of the enduring meaning that results, and that becomes that which triggers an auto action, an auto psychophysical action. The inherent possibility of signification is recognized in that meaning, and an auto-affecting emergence of the sign takes place as an auto psychophysical action. So the emergence of sign is an auto action as a psychophysical action, simply because of the enduring self-actualizing power of the sign. So that results in 5, the psychophysical products of the signs of enduring, and they're ready to be configured now. There's the only thing left, and that's step 6. So with the product of the psychophysical signs of enduring, we proceed to the psychophysical action of drawing a configuration. A separate activity is needed, which is the sketching of the configuration. And just like image, it's a psychophysical action that produces a psychophysical product of an enduring sign model. An enduring sign model. And so he takes us to this point from image to sign image. We begin with the intuitive image. We've progressed all the way to the series of signs and their configuration into a deeper meaning and more significant enduring sign model, a sign model of endurance. And he says now the self is interrogated to put the sign model into effect in the realm of actuality by writing a praxis document. So for Twardowski, action, ethical action means writing. If you want to change history, you write. You put the notion of the true, you put the psychophysical product of the enduring sign model into actuality through writing a sign document, a praxis sign document. So we'll pause here just a second. We'll take a look at that document. Okay. Now when we get to the writing of a praxis sign document, Twardowski gives us 10 aspects. Number 1, we preserve non-enduring psychophysical products that express non-enduring mental products, because thinking performs a mental action that produces thought products. These are non-enduring mental products of thought. Now, coupled with speaking, which is also a psychophysical product that is non-enduring. So he says, therefore, we've entered the realm of thinking. Now, thinking produces mental products of thought and psychophysical products of speech. Mental products of thought and psychophysical products of speech. It's the psychophysical products of speech that are preserved in writing, in written signs, written sign language, or metaphorical symbolic writing. And that becomes a psychophysical product document that is enduring. And this document takes on its own independence, and within its own independence it has power because it can elicit a mental product from different persons. It can elicit many additional mental actions and mental products from a group of individuals who take up the document. So 8, he says, therefore there is a group of common attributes to the diverse mental products that emerge, which equals the meaning of the written document. So meaning becomes attributed to the document itself, and it's viewed as an inherent presence. We kind of retroactively posit the fact that this evolving intersubjective meaning is an inherent presence in the document itself. So 10, he says, the shared intersubjective meaning becomes an abstraction of common attributes that we take up as a kind of a shared communal language. And for Twardowski, this is the meaning of universality, because for him, he says, the abstract mental product then gains its own independence, and it's kind of he calls it a mental artifact of universality. So we end up with kind of a floating mental artifact of universality that kind of coexists between all of us, which we all interrelate with and interrelate with each other concerning, but we have formed it out of this entire process this logic that he has just outlined. But it takes on its own kind of independence, but for him it's an independent artifact, an artifact of an abstract mental product. And so for Twardowski, that's his version of universality. Universality is intersubjective abstract mental product. And so we'll just give it a little quick run here for a summary. So to begin with, our project was a theory of relation, and we were to consider 4 areas concerning subjectivity: the stages of sensation, perception, representation, and conceptualization. the modalities of the images and concepts, judgments, feelings, and volition, and the realms of the intuitive and the non-intuitive. And we were to pass through the representations of judgments at the communal dialogue area of the Dakunta threshold. And there we would engage in understanding that we are dealing with physical actions and physical products, mental actions, mental products, and especially psychophysical actions and psychophysical products, and that we therefore seek to reach a deeper sense of meaning for our sensate intuitive images, and we want to move beyond logical sense, move beyond psychophysiological sense, and we want to reach the dispositional sense of the enduring trait that inherently exists within the substrate intuitive image. When we reach that deeper meaning, we're ready to transfer to conceptualization. It has to be posited. It has to posit a configuration. It becomes a notion of the true. It's a reality. It's not phenomenology anymore. It's an internal externality. It becomes the external expression of an internal mental action. And we end up with a series of signs of meaning which are ready to form as a sign model. That takes us to the very axis threshold of pure subjective identity. And we begin with the action of image to create the product of image. Then we pass through the action of viewing. And through the action of viewing, we actually acquire an enduring meaning that exists in its own independence. And through an auto-affecting action, it actually self-actualizes its own sign. And we end up with a psychophysical product of the signs of enduring. And that only leaves us configuration, and configuration creates the final enduring sign model through sketching, and then we're interrogated to put it into actuality and to change history to a deeper, more meaningful history. We do this by entering the realm of thinking and writing. Thinking produces mental products of thought and psychophysical products of speech. It's the psychophysical products of speech that we transfer into writing, and we take them up and write them as a written psychophysical product document that has an endurance of its own, and enduring on its own, it actually can elicit mental activity from other selves. And so the self-sustaining, individually existing document actually elicits mental activity and mental product, mental actions and mental products, and eventually we come up with an intersubjective group of common attributes that gain an abstraction of their own and become kind of a universality type realm where we coexist, and that ends up being Twardowski's realm of the abstract mental product that gains its own independence, and he calls that a universal artifact, the universal artifact.